Subscribe. This channel contains only real stories. The air was heavy with heat. Late August in the city always carried that kind of weight. The kind that pressed down on your shoulders, soaked your shirt in sweat, and made the pavement shimmer like water. But it wasn't the heat that made Keisha's hands sweat as she walked down Marlowe Avenue that day. It was the look. The look in the cop's eyes. She hadn't even noticed the patrol car roll up. Her daughter Samira was skipping ahead of her. One chubby hand wrapped around the string of a pink helium balloon. They had just left the corner store. Milk, bread, a small juice box for Samira. That was all. Just another day. Another walk home. But now, ma'am, stop right there. The voice boomed like it was coming from the sky. Keisha turned around slowly. Samira stopped skipping. She looked back at her mother, confused. The balloon bobbed behind her. Keisha didn't answer at first. She was wearing jeans, a faded t-shirt, hair pulled back into a frizzy bun. No makeup, no purse. Her hands were empty. She had done nothing wrong. Nothing. "Excuse me?" she asked, quietly. "I said stop." The officer shouted again, stepping closer. He was tall, white, maybe in his 40s. His sunglasses covered his eyes, but his mouth was set in a hard, flat line. His hand hovered over his holster. His partner hadn't even gotten out of the car. Keisha raised her hands slowly. "I'm just walking my daughter home," she said. "From the store." "I didn't ask for a story," he snapped. "ID. I don't carry ID to buy milk." Wrong thing to say. His jaw tensed. He took another step forward. "You talk smart to me?" Keisha's mouth went dry. Her heart began to pound. So loud it drowned out the traffic. The kids playing down the street. Even Samira's little voice asking, "Mommy? What's wrong?" "I'm not talking smart," she said quickly. I don't understand why you're stopping me." 10 feet away now. His fingers twitched at his waist. The holster clicked. That sound made something cold slither down Keisha's spine. She moved her body slightly in front of Samira, just enough to shield her, not enough to make it look aggressive. People were watching. A few teenagers across the street had pulled out phones. A man stopped his bike and pointed his camera. Keisha felt the shift in the air, the silence of anticipation, the sharp sting of fear. "I'm asking again," the cop barked. "You got drugs? Weapons? What's in the bag?" "Groceries," she said. Her voice cracked. She hated that. "Put it down. Step back." Samira started crying. That was the sound that broke her. "No," Keisha said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. Just firm. "You don't get to point a gun at my baby because I bought bread." He didn't like that. He pulled the gun. Just like that. Black metal, glinting in the sun. Not pointed directly yet. Just lifted like a threat hanging in the space between logic and panic. The crowd gasped. Someone yelled, "She's got a kid." Another person shouted, "We're filming this, man." Keisha stood frozen. Her knees shook, but she didn't drop. She thought of her father. "Men don't cry," he used to say. But he wasn't here now. He had died in a prison hospital. Wrong place, wrong time. 50 years old. Heart failure. No justice. No story. She had cried when they buried him. Cried so hard she couldn't breathe. She was 16. Now she didn't cry. She just stared into the barrel of that gun. She didn't beg. She whispered, "Please. She's only 5. Samira clutched her leg, hiccuping sobs into her thigh. The balloon floated upward behind them, innocent and absurd. Then, from the car, the other officer finally moved. A younger man, Hispanic. He stepped out, shouting, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a kid, man." The gun wavered. "Lower it," the partner barked. "Holster it. You hear me? People are filming." Reluctantly, slowly, the white officer lowered his weapon. His face was burning red, but he looked scared now. Not of Keisha, of the crowd, of the consequences. Keisha's legs almost gave out. She scooped Samira into her arms. The little girl clung to her, snot and tears soaking her shirt. "You good?" the second officer asked, stepping between them. "You want to make a statement?" File a report. Keisha didn't answer. She just turned and walked. Fast. Her legs were shaking. Her whole body shook. She didn't look back. She made it 2 blocks before she collapsed on her knees in the alley behind their apartment building. Samira sat beside her, confused, afraid, watching her mother's chest rise and fall like it might break. Keisha buried her face in her hands. She wanted to scream, to cry, but the only thing she could say was, "They were going to kill me." Her voice sounded small, foreign, like someone else's. Samira leaned her head on her shoulder. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" Keisha almost vomited. "No, baby," she whispered. "You were perfect." The pink balloon had drifted away, a tiny dot in the blue. Later that night, Keisha couldn't sleep. The city buzzed outside her cracked window, distant sirens, a couple arguing 2 doors down, the low rumble of bass from a passing car. But inside her 1-bedroom apartment, there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Samira had finally cried herself to sleep, curled up in a nest of blankets on their couch. Her small chest rose and fell, lips slightly parted. One hand clutched around a stuffed animal that had seen better days. Keisha watched her from across the room, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't even taken her shoes off. She kept seeing the gun, the way it looked under the sun, that sudden shift in air when the officer decided he could. Like she was a threat, like her daughter didn't exist. What if no one had been there? What if nobody had pulled out a phone? What if the other officer hadn't spoken up? Would she even be breathing now? Would Samira be alive? She covered her mouth with both hands and wept, silently, careful not to wake her baby. In the morning, the story had already begun to spread. Some teenager had posted the video on TikTok. The caption read, "White cop pulls gun on black mom and 5-year-old daughter for walking home #Marloave #Justice for Keisha." By noon, it had over 200,000 views. By evening, it hit local news. She didn't ask for that. She hadn't given her name. But someone had tagged her anyway, a neighbor probably. They'd blurred her daughter's face. But Keisha saw the fear in her own eyes as she raised her hands and said, "We're just going home." She hadn't realized how scared she looked until she saw it from the outside. People started showing up. Reporters, activists, strangers with signs. One woman pressed a business card into Keisha's hand and whispered, "You need a lawyer." Another hugged her without asking. A white woman cried and said she was so sorry for everything her people had done. Keisha just nodded and kept her arms around Samira. Her landlord wasn't impressed. "You causing a scene now?" he grumbled, standing in the stairwell. "I don't want trouble on my property. Cameras. Signs. You bringing attention. My other tenants don't like it." Keisha stared at him. "I didn't ask for attention." He shrugged. "Still brought it." She knew that look too. Same as the cop. Same as the judge who'd handled her custody case after her boyfriend left. Same as the teacher who said Samira was too loud in preschool. That look that meant, "You don't belong here. You make us uncomfortable. And we'll remind you who's in charge." The first time Keisha ever understood fear, real fear, she was 6. She'd been walking home from school with her cousin, holding his hand, when a car slowed down beside them. The man inside was white, smiling too hard, asking if they wanted candy. Her cousin pulled her away and they ran all the way to her grandmother's porch, panting, shoes flying off. Her grandmother hadn't called the police, just shook her head, muttered something about the devil walking in daylight. "We don't call them," she'd said. "Not for us." And Keisha had learned the lesson early. Now, years later, she felt that same sickness in her belly, that same crawl of dread under her skin. But this time it was different. This time she had Samira. A knock on the door that night made her jump. Samira sat up on the couch, blinking sleepily. Keisha opened the door cautiously. It was the young officer, the one who had told his partner to put the gun away. He wasn't in uniform. "Sorry to come late," he said, voice low. "I had to find the right apartment." Keisha didn't answer. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure you and your daughter were okay." Why? He blinked. Because I saw what happened. It wasn't right. I'm writing a report. An official one. The department's gonna hate me, but I couldn't let it go. Keisha studied him. He looked tired. Not performative. Just a man who'd seen something he couldn't forget. She stepped aside. He walked in, slowly, glancing around the small room. Samira sat silently, hugging her bear. I'm Officer Luis Delgado, he said gently, kneeling to her level. Hi, sweetheart. I'm really sorry about yesterday. That shouldn't have happened. Samira didn't say anything. Keisha stayed near the door. Delgado stood up again. Listen, I don't know if it helps, but there are people in the department who care, who see what's wrong. You said nothing at first, Keisha said. I was scared, he admitted. He's got seniority. Pulls that kind of stuff all the time. I never saw him point it at a kid before. That was too far. She nodded, but her arms were crossed. You're probably gonna get punished, she said flatly. He shrugged. Maybe, but I've got 2 kids. And when I saw your little girl, he stopped. Anyway, I left my number on the table, in case you ever need someone on the inside. Then he left. Keisha sat up all night again. Not crying this time, just thinking. Her life had already been falling apart. Bills, groceries, trying to keep Samira safe in a neighborhood where sirens were lullabies. But now it felt like something cracked open, like the ground wasn't stable anymore. Still, people were watching now. People were listening. Maybe she could speak. Maybe she had to, because next time someone might not be filming. The next morning, Keisha woke to pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. She wrapped herself in her old robe, heart pounding faster than the fist outside. Samira stirred but didn't wake. She opened the door slowly. The landlord. Miss Johnson, he said without greeting. I gave you a warning. This place isn't zoned for protests. I've had 3 tenants threaten to move out already. You're becoming a liability. People showed up, Keisha said, voice still raspy with sleep. I didn't invite them. You think that matters? His mouth twisted into a sneer. You're bringing heat on this building. That video, your face. People associate you with trouble. Her fists clenched at her sides. You're just mad because I didn't stay silent. He shrugged. Doesn't matter why. You've got 30 days. Her stomach dropped. 30. Eviction notice is taped to your mailbox. Take it up with the city if you want, but you won't win. Not on paper. She slammed the door in his face. Samira was sitting up now, rubbing her eyes. Mommy. Keisha knelt beside her and tried to smile. Go back to sleep, baby. It's still early. But she knew neither of them would sleep again that morning. By noon, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, missed calls, emails, strangers, news stations, civil rights groups. A voicemail from a lawyer offering free representation. Another from a woman who said, We need you to speak at the city meeting. People are listening. You could help so many. Keisha stared at the cracked screen in disbelief. 2 days ago, no one had known her name. Now, they wanted her to speak for everyone. But who had ever spoken for her? She thought about her mother. About the long hours she worked cleaning houses in neighborhoods where no one looked her in the eye. She thought about the way she used to press a 20 into Keisha's hand and whisper, Don't trust their smiles, baby. They only love you till you stand up. Keisha didn't want to stand up. She wanted to run. She wanted her husband back, even if he hadn't been perfect. She wanted her old life back, even if it was broken and small and invisible. She wanted not to be the girl from the video, but she didn't get to choose anymore. Outside, someone was painting a mural on the brick wall facing the street. A tall woman in overalls stood on a ladder, headphones in, spray can hissing. Keisha stepped outside, arms crossed. The woman saw her and climbed down. You're Keisha, right? Keisha nodded. I'm Tiana, artist, organizer, friend of the people. I figured your street deserved something that told the real story. Keisha looked at the mural. It wasn't finished yet, but already it showed a mother and daughter. Brown skin, wide eyes, hands held tight. Behind them, a looming figure in blue with a raised hand. The mother stood between. It hurt to look at. "That's supposed to be me?" she asked quietly. Tiana nodded. "Art's not always comfortable. But it's true." Keisha's jaw tightened. "You could have asked." Tiana didn't flinch. "Would you have said yes?" "No." "Then I did the right thing." Keisha turned and walked back inside, unsure if she was angry or grateful or just tired. That night, after Samira fell asleep again, Keisha sat at the small kitchen table with the eviction notice in one hand and her cracked phone in the other. She thought about calling that lawyer. She thought about calling her sister, even though they hadn't spoken in a year. She thought about calling her father. But her father had been dead for 3 years. His number didn't exist anymore. Just his voice, buried somewhere deep in her chest. "Don't let him see you cry, Keisha," he used to say. "World don't care about tears. They care about strength. And if they break you, they'll never stop." But she had cried. On the sidewalk. In front of everyone. In front of her child. She wasn't strong. She was just surviving. The next morning, Samira wouldn't eat. She pushed her cereal around the bowl, face pinched, quiet. Keisha sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. "You okay, baby?" Samira shrugged. "I don't like outside anymore." Keisha felt her heart rip a little more. "But you love the park," she said. Samira's lip trembled. "What if the man comes back?" Keisha didn't have an answer. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Mommy won't let anything happen to you. I promise." But she didn't know if that was true. By the end of the week, the pressure was everywhere. People sent money to a GoFundMe someone had started on her behalf. Over $15,000 poured in. Some messages said, "Stay strong, Queen." Others just said, "I'm sorry." The officer who'd pulled the gun was placed on leave. Not fired. Not charged. Just suspended with pay. Keisha wanted to scream. "You threatened to kill me," she said to the TV, watching the press conference. "And they gave you a vacation." But she didn't scream. She sat. She watched. She memorized every word they said. And when the local community center offered her a chance to speak at a town hall, real platform, real cameras, real people, she surprised even herself when she said yes. The night before the event, she stood in front of the mirror, holding her daughter's tiny hands. "Do I look scared?" she asked. Samira nodded. "You do." Keisha laughed, then cried a little. "You know why I'm going tomorrow?" she asked. "To yell at the bad man?" Keisha shook her head. "To make sure they never forget what they saw, what they almost let happen." Samira hugged her legs. "I'll be brave too," the little girl whispered. Keisha smiled. "I know you will." The town hall was packed. Not the kind of packed that made you feel supported, the kind that made you sweat through your shirt, even with the AC blowing cold. Every seat was taken. People stood along the back wall, some with signs, some with phones held high, recording even before anyone had spoken. Keisha stood behind the curtain, gripping the edge of it with both hands. Samira was with Tiana in the front row. Tiana had insisted on coming, even helped Keisha pick out her outfit. Simple but strong. A dark denim jacket, a black dress, and her mother's gold earrings. The ones she'd worn to every church Sunday. "You don't have to say everything," Tiana had told her backstage. "You just have to say what's real." But Keisha didn't know what was real anymore. Everything had happened so fast. The video, the headlines, the mural, the donations. It felt like everyone had taken a piece of her and made it theirs. She didn't recognize herself on the posters. Keisha Johnson, fighting for justice. She wasn't fighting. She was surviving. The moderator tapped her gently on the arm. "You're on in 30 seconds. Keisha nodded. Then, as if from nowhere, she heard a voice in her head. Her father's. "Speak clear. Hold your chin high. Don't mumble like you scared to breathe." She took a deep breath and walked out. The clapping started immediately. Warm, encouraging, but it faded too quickly for comfort. People wanted to hear her. They wanted a moment. She approached the microphone slowly. It was too tall. She adjusted it, cleared her throat, looked out at the sea of eyes. Some were kind, some curious, some skeptical. She almost turned around. But then she saw Samira, her tiny hand clutching Tiana's, and something settled in her spine. "My name is Keisha Johnson," she began. "You probably already know that." A nervous ripple of laughter. "I'm a mother. I live on 9th and DeWitt. Or I used to. I've been given 30 days to move. I don't have another place yet." No one laughed at that. "I was walking with my daughter, 5 years old. We were going to the dollar store to buy shampoo. That's it. Shampoo." She looked down at her fingers, clenched on the podium. A cop, Officer Brendan Price, pulled up, said I looked suspicious, said I matched a description. He never said what description. Just, female, black, hoodie. She let the silence stretch. She heard people shifting in their chairs. "You've seen the video. You saw what happened next. But you didn't see what came before that. You didn't see the way his eyes scanned my child like she might be a weapon. You didn't hear the way my voice broke when I said, 'We're just walking.'" Her voice cracked now. She fought it. "You didn't see how scared my daughter was. How she started crying when he reached for his belt." She paused again, just long enough for the weight to settle. But 10 people pulled out their phones. 10 strangers said, "No, not today." There was movement in the crowd. Murmurs. A few claps. "And because of that, only because of that, I'm still here, talking to you." A woman in the back shouted, "Tell it, sister." Keisha's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I didn't ask for this. I'm not an activist. I didn't go to college. I work 2 jobs when I can get M. I raise my daughter by myself. And I try, every day, not to draw attention." She took another breath. "But maybe that's the problem. We've been quiet too long, hoping things will get better if we just stay small." Her voice rose now, just a little. "I stayed small, and a man still pointed a gun at me, in front of my child." A few people stood. A slow building clap started, but she held up her hand to stop it. "I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to remind you that this isn't rare. I'm just the one you saw. There are hundreds of Keishas. Thousands. We're tired. We're grieving. We're scared to walk outside with our babies." She stepped back from the mic. "I want justice. But more than that, I want safety. And I want peace. And I want the people who are supposed to protect us to see us not as threats, not as suspects, as mothers, as daughters, as people." Now the standing ovation came fully, loud, sustained. Keisha backed away, heart pounding, not from fear anymore, but from something new, something close to power. She sat back down next to Tiana, eyes brimming, and wrapped her arms around Samira. "You were so brave," her daughter whispered. Keisha kissed her cheek. "So were you, baby." Later that night, back home, she turned off her phone for the first time in a week. She didn't want to read the articles, or the angry comments, or the praise. She just wanted quiet. Samira lay asleep on the couch, the TV playing some cartoon on mute. Keisha pulled a blanket over her and sat beside her, stroking her hair. The mural outside was nearly done. It now included the names of other women, Sandra, Brianna, Kendra, woven into the background like stars. Keisha had cried when she saw it, because it meant someone saw them, all of them, and tomorrow she'd meet with the lawyer. Not because she believed the system would fix itself, but because her daughter deserved a roof, and a mother who didn't flinch every time a siren passed by. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We ain't done yet." The day after the town hall, Keisha woke up to a knock on the door. Not the police, not a neighbor. It was a woman in a beige pantsuit, standing with a clipboard and a confident smile that looked more practiced than real. "Keisha Johnson?" she asked. Keisha held Samira on her hip, blinking through the morning light. "Who's asking?" The woman introduced herself as Clara from the Housing Support Initiative, a nonprofit. She said, "We saw your speech. It moved a lot of people." Keisha didn't answer. She didn't trust a lot of people. "We have temporary units available. 2 bedrooms. Clean. Safe. Rent-free for 3 months while you get back on your feet. Keisha narrowed her eyes. What's the catch? Clara chuckled softly. There's no catch. Just, someone saw your story and decided to help. That someone remained nameless. But by that afternoon, Keisha and Samira were unpacking boxes in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a worn but decent building on Maple Street. It smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. The windows were big. The heater worked. The shower had pressure. That alone felt like luxury. Samira ran circles on the carpet. Keisha stood by the window and watched the street. She wasn't used to help. Wasn't used to safe. That night, she lay awake long after Samira had drifted off, listening to the creaks in the walls, the soft hum of a distant train. She felt like something was about to shift again, and she was right. 3 days later, she got a call from someone claiming to be Officer Price's union rep. She didn't answer. 2 hours later, someone slipped an envelope under her door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "Some things are better forgotten. For your daughter's sake." Keisha's hands shook. She looked around the room like the walls had eyes. The letter wasn't signed. No fingerprint. Nothing traceable. Just threat. She held Samira tighter that night. Tighter than ever before. The next morning, she went to see her lawyer. Mr. Jacobs was mid-50s, white, with tired eyes and a calm voice that sounded like it had talked a lot of people off a ledge. He read the note, then looked at her. "Do you want to report this?" Keisha laughed. But it wasn't funny. "To who?" "The police." He nodded slowly. "I know. It's complicated." "No," she said firmly. "It's not complicated. It's simple. They protect their own. Always have." Jacobs leaned forward. "I understand your mistrust. Truly. But the case is gaining traction. The officer's been placed on leave pending investigation. Your testimony matters. You matter." Keisha looked at the floor. "No one cared about me a month ago. Now I'm a symbol. But when this fades, when it's not trending anymore." Her voice cracked. "Who protects us then?" Jacobs didn't have an answer, but he handed her a folder. Inside were documents, a timeline, a strategy. "We're filing civil suit next week. For unlawful threat of force. For emotional trauma. For endangering a minor." Keisha nodded. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. And peace. But peace, she realized, had to be fought for. Later that day, Keisha took Samira to the playground. For the first time in weeks. She sat on the bench while Samira ran toward the swings, laughter pealing out like bells. Keisha watched her. She remembered the fear in Samira's eyes when the officer pointed his gun. She remembered the sound Samira made. Not quite a scream, more like a shatter. She'd never heard it before. She prayed she never would again. A woman approached, tall, mid-30s, brown skin, glasses. "You're Keisha, right?" Keisha bristled, then nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For being brave. For standing up. For surviving. A lot of us, we just go home and cry into our pillows. You didn't." Keisha didn't know what to say. The woman reached into her purse, pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a bracelet, hand-woven, colorful. "My daughter made it. Said your little girl might like it." Keisha took it. It was pink and purple with little beads. "Tell her thank you," she said quietly. The woman nodded and left. Keisha walked to Samira. "Look, baby." Samira gasped and grabbed the bracelet, sliding it onto her wrist. "Now I'm magic," she whispered. "You always been magic," Keisha said. She looked around the park, and for the first time in a long time she didn't feel watched. She felt held. By the people. By something bigger. That night she made dinner, real dinner, not canned soup or crackers. Fried chicken, corn, mac and cheese. Samira danced in the kitchen while Keisha stirred the pot, music playing low from her phone. Samira's laughter rang through the apartment like sunlight through broken blinds. Keisha smiled. But in the back of her mind, that letter still sat like a bruise. She'd show it to the press if she had to. She'd show them all. Because she wasn't going quiet. Not anymore. The knock came at midnight. 3 slow, heavy thuds on the apartment door. Keisha froze in bed. Samira stirred beside her, small arms wrapping tighter around her stuffed unicorn. The knock came again. She tiptoed to the peephole. A man stood there, white, late 40s, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his forehead. No badge, no name, no reason to be there. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't open, didn't breathe. After a moment, the man turned and walked away, calm, like he knew she was watching. She waited 5 full minutes before unlocking the chain, stepping into the hall. Gone. No trace. But on the floor lay a piece of cardboard. Scrawled in black Sharpie, "You're putting your kid at risk. Stop." She locked the door with trembling fingers. Called Jacobs. Left a voicemail. Sat on the couch till sunrise, eyes on the entrance, a kitchen knife in her hand. By the next day, the local news had run 2 more segments on her story. One called her a symbol of resistance. Another called her reckless. The internet loved the headline, but behind the clicks and the comments were faces. Real people. That afternoon, 3 mothers from the neighborhood showed up with groceries. "We know what it's like," one said, "to be told to shut up, to be afraid in your own home." Another one, eyes hard and tired, added, "You keep going. We got your back." Keisha didn't cry. She couldn't. She just nodded and helped them unload the bags. There was cereal, diapers, rice, chicken, even crayons. Samira grabbed them instantly, running to the coffee table to draw. Later, Keisha looked. It was a picture of her and Samira holding hands, with a big red sun in the sky. And next to them, a woman with long hair and a cape. "Who's this?" she asked. Samira grinned. "That's you, Mommy. You're the hero." Keisha felt her throat close. She'd never wanted to be a hero. She'd only wanted to survive. That evening, Jacobs returned her call. "We're reporting this," he said about the note. "To who?" "To the DOJ. We're going federal now. They're watching the case. They'll see this for what it is, intimidation." Keisha paced the living room. "And if they don't? If this just disappears into some folder like all the rest?" Jacobs didn't try to convince her. He just said, "I'll stand with you until it doesn't." It wasn't a promise of safety, but it was a promise of presence. Sometimes that was more powerful. A few days later, she got a call from a woman named Vanessa, a schoolteacher from across town. She was organizing a rally. Peaceful. Families, churches, nurses, veterans. They wanted Keisha to speak. Keisha hesitated. "I'm not a leader." "You're already leading," Vanessa replied. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Keisha hung up without agreeing. She walked to the window, watched the street. Somewhere out there was someone who wanted her scared. Someone who'd knock again. Someone who'd rather silence her than see her win. But there were others too, women with groceries, children with crayons, lawyers who stayed on the phone at midnight, teachers who called her a leader. What side was stronger? She didn't know yet, but the scale was tipping. The night before the rally, Samira couldn't sleep. She curled up in Keisha's lap on the couch. "Are the bad people gone yet?" she whispered. "No, baby," Keisha said, honest. "But the good people are louder now." Samira thought for a second. "Can you be loud too?" Keisha brushed the curls from her daughter's forehead. "I'm learning." The rally gathered outside City Hall. Over 500 people. Signs, chants, drums, kids on shoulders, elders holding candles. Keisha stood in the back, stomach in knots. Jacobs was beside her. So was Vanessa, and 2 other moms from the building. The mayor hadn't shown up, but the press had, and so had a microphone. Vanessa gave her a look. Keisha stepped forward. The crowd quieted. She looked out at brown faces, white faces, old faces, tired faces, determined faces. She took a breath. "My name is Keisha Johnson," she said. "I'm not a politician. I'm not an expert. I'm just a mother." A murmur ran through the crowd. A quiet recognition. "A few weeks ago, I was walking my daughter down our block, just like I do every day. A man with a badge decided we were a threat. that my skin made me dangerous, that my child didn't deserve safety. She paused. Her hands trembled. But here's the thing. We do. We do deserve safety, dignity, peace. Not just the ones with money or power. All of us. People nodded. Some clapped softly. Keisha continued. They told me not to speak. Left letters. Knocked on my door at night. Said I was risking my daughter's life. But staying silent is a risk. Pretending it didn't happen. That's what kills us slowly. The crowd stirred louder now. Some raised fists. Some wiped eyes. So no, she said, voice rising. I won't stop. I won't sit down. Not while there are mothers burying sons for walking too fast. Not while daughters are taught to be small and quiet just to stay alive. A cheer burst from the back. Then more. Then more. I am not just a name on a headline. I am a woman. I am a mother. I am tired. And I am ready to fight. Her voice cracked on the last word. But it didn't matter. The crowd erupted. Keisha stepped back, heart pounding, breath shallow. She looked at Vanessa, who was crying. She looked at Jacobs, who nodded solemnly. She looked at Samira, standing with one of the moms on a bench, clapping wildly, eyes shining. And she smiled, because storms didn't ask permission. They came, but so did the sun. And this time Keisha wasn't alone. It wasn't even 24 hours after the rally when the first real threat came. Not a knock this time. Not a note, but a brick. Through the window, glass exploded across the living room floor. Keisha and Samira had just sat down for dinner. Peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices. The sound was like a gunshot. Keisha screamed, pulling Samira to the ground and shielding her with her body. The brick landed inches from the girl's feet. No sirens. No apologies. Just silence outside. And a single word scrawled on the brick in red paint. Liar. Keisha called the police. They took 35 minutes to arrive. The officer, young, white, nervous, looked at the shattered window and then at her. You sure it wasn't kids? Gang stuff. Keisha stared at him. You think gangs write liar on bricks? You think this just happened? He shifted uncomfortably, took a few pictures, wrote down her statement, left without offering to help board up the window. No patrol. No follow-up. Jacobs came by an hour later with tools and plywood. They worked in silence. At one point he said, You can leave, you know. I could help you find a safer place. But she shook her head. I already left once. My voice. My fear. My rights. I'm not running again. He didn't argue, just handed her the hammer. By morning, Samira had drawn hearts on the plywood, in pink marker. She said they were magic shields. Keisha didn't cry. Not yet. She had to go to work. Work was different now. She still cleaned houses, but fewer people were calling. One woman said kindly, It's just a lot right now. The media, you know? I don't want attention on my home. Another simply ghosted her after seeing the news story online. Money was running low again. Groceries got smaller. The heat stayed off longer. But Keisha didn't stop. She printed out flyers. Justice for all means justice for us. She handed them out at bus stops, put them in laundromats, posted online. And people responded. Some just liked her posts. Some offered donations, small ones but still. A pastor from across the city invited her to speak to his youth group. A group of college students asked her to come to their campus. A filmmaker messaged her, asking if she'd consider a documentary. Keisha said no to that one. She wasn't ready to be a symbol on a screen. She was still trying to survive a week at a time. Still trying to get her daughter to sleep without nightmares. Still jumping at every sound near the window. But she didn't hide. That mattered. One night, Samira crawled into bed and whispered, I don't want the bad man to come back. Keisha pulled her close. He won't. But what if he does? Keisha looked her daughter in the eyes. Then I'll be here. I'll protect you. You remember what you told me? That I was a hero. Samira nodded sleepily. Well, heroes don't run. Not even when they're scared. Samira smiled and whispered, You're braver than Batman. It was the highest praise a 5-year-old could give. A week after the brick, Keisha received a letter. Not handwritten, typed, clean, from the City Department of Internal Affairs. We are officially opening an investigation into Officer Daniel Haskins regarding the incident that occurred on May 12th. Her hands shook. They were taking it seriously. Jacobs called to confirm it was real, but he warned her. They'll dig into your life now, your past, your record, anything to discredit you. She sighed. I've got nothing to hide. I know, but that doesn't mean they won't twist things. Keisha stared at the letter again. Felt like both a victory and a warning. But it was something. It was movement. Later that week, a reporter came by. A young black woman with a warm voice and sharp eyes. Her name was Candace. They sat in Keisha's kitchen, Samira drawing in the next room. Can I ask you something off the record? Candace said. Sure. Do you ever wish you just kept walking that day? That you hadn't looked him in the eye? Keisha didn't answer right away. She remembered the moment. The scream in her throat, the way Samira's hand had felt in hers, the burn of being treated like less. No, she said at last, because if I'd kept walking, I would have taught my daughter to stay silent when someone steps on her neck. I'd rather show her how to scream and how to stand up. Candace nodded slowly. That's the quote I'll remember. But not everyone was on her side. One night, someone slashed the tires of her neighbor's car. A note left behind said, "Wrong side of history." The neighbor, a Latina woman named Marisol, knocked on Keisha's door the next day. She wasn't angry, just tired. I believe in what you're doing, she said. But they're coming after all of us now. You know that, right? Keisha looked at her with guilt and gratitude. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Marisol said. Be ready. Then she handed Keisha a flashlight, some pepper spray, and a new lock for her front door. Be safe, Hermana. That night, Keisha couldn't sleep. She stood at the window looking out at the dark. She thought about her father. Strict, quiet, serious. He'd grown up in the South, fought to get out, told her that silence was survival. She remembered how he'd said, keep your head down, don't make trouble, just live. She'd believed that for years. But what kind of life was that? What kind of example was that for Samira? She pressed her forehead to the cool glass. Her reflection stared back. Tired eyes. A body stretched thin, but still standing, still fighting, still seen. And that, more than anything, was dangerous. Because the world didn't know what to do with a woman who refused to vanish. It started with a voicemail. No name, no number. Just a low male voice, cold and steady. We know where you live. Keisha stood frozen in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Samira played on the floor behind her, building a castle out of juice boxes. Her little world, untouched. For now, the silence after the message felt louder than the threat itself. Keisha didn't tell anyone that day, not even Jacobs. She just sat on the couch after Samira went to bed, holding the phone in both hands, like it might explode. Later that night, she called the voicemail again and listened to it 3 more times. Then she deleted it. Not out of denial, out of exhaustion, out of something worse, familiarity. It was happening again. She was becoming a problem, and problems get silenced. 2 days later, a fire broke out at the local community center. It didn't make the news. It wasn't big, just a trash can in the back alley. But it was the same place where Keisha had spoken 2 nights before, where she'd handed out flyers and told her story to 12 teenage girls with bright eyes and brave mouths. Someone wanted to scare her. They were doing it well. Jacobs insisted on moving her. Just for a while, he said. Just until the heat dies down. I've got friends. No, Keisha said. This isn't weakness. I know. Then why are you acting like leaving is surrender? She stared at him, tired, angry. Because I finally stood up. And if I sit down now, what does that teach my daughter? He didn't answer. He knew she was right, even if it hurt. That same week, something unexpected happened. Her old high school history teacher, Ms. Carr, messaged her. They hadn't spoken in years. The message was short. You were always meant to shake the world. Let me help. Call me. Keisha did. Ms. Carr was older now, but her voice was still sharp and warm. I watched that video, she said. I cried. I screamed. And then I realized, maybe it's time for you to speak louder. What do you mean? I've got connections. People. Civil rights lawyers. Activists. Journalists who aren't afraid to tell the whole story. Keisha hesitated. I didn't want to be the story. You are now, Ms. Carr said softly. But maybe you can write the ending. The next week, Keisha found herself in front of a microphone again. But this time it was indoors, at a university hall, with lights and cameras and 100 eyes watching. She almost turned around before walking on stage. Her hands shook. Her mouth was dry. But then, in the third row, she saw Samira on Jacob's lap, holding a handmade sign. It said, "My mommy is brave." And something inside her steadied. She stepped up to the mic, took a breath, spoke. She told the story, all of it, from the sidewalk to the gun, from the neighbors who whispered support to the bricks through the window. She didn't cry. Not then. Her voice stayed strong even as she talked about the voicemail, the fear, the fire. But when she spoke about Samira, how her daughter asked if the bad man still had his gun, her voice cracked. She paused. The room was dead quiet. And then she said, I am not here because I am extraordinary. I am here because too many of us have been told we are invisible, that our lives are background noise, that our fear is our fault. But I am not background. I am not a whisper. I am here. The room exploded in applause. And Keisha, for the first time in weeks, felt something like hope. But not everyone was clapping. Outside the hall, 2 men in plain clothes stood by a black SUV. Watching. They didn't speak. Didn't approach. Just made sure she saw them. Ms. Carr noticed too. They want you scared, she said. Because fear keeps systems in place. I am scared, Keisha admitted. That's why you're dangerous, Ms. Carr replied. Because scared people who stand up anyway, they're unstoppable. Later that night, Samira crawled into Keisha's bed again. But this time, she didn't say she was afraid. She said, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to talk in a microphone like you. Keisha smiled, pulled her close. You will, baby. You'll talk. And they'll listen. Then she added, and you won't need a brick to break a window to be heard. Samira blinked, confused. Bricks are for building. Keisha kissed her forehead. Exactly. The investigation into Officer Haskins was still ongoing. Internal Affairs had interviewed her twice now. They'd also spoken to Jacobs, to bystanders, to neighbors. The videos, all 10 of them, had gone viral again after her university speech. Pressure was building. Slow, uneven, but real. One night, Jacobs came by with a document. Anonymous source, he said, found this in a leak thread online. It was a copy of a disciplinary report. Haskins had multiple prior complaints. Use of force, aggressive conduct. One even mentioned threatening a black teen with a weapon during a traffic stop. No charges, no suspensions, just retraining. Keisha felt the heat rise in her chest. She was not the first, but maybe if she kept going, she'd be the last. Still, the backlash kept coming. Trolls flooded her inbox. Emails saying things like, you're just playing the victim. You're kind, always looking for attention. Bet you made it all up for fame. One message said, you'll be gone soon. People like you don't last. She almost believed it. But then Samira would run up to her, arms wide, yelling, Mommy! And suddenly, she remembered why she was still standing. Not for fame, not for revenge, but for her daughter, for her neighborhood, for herself. One morning, Keisha walked Samira to preschool and saw something new on the community center's wall. Someone had painted a mural. It was rough but beautiful. A black woman, head held high. Behind her, a child holding her hand. Above them, the words, we see you. Keisha stared at it for a long time. She didn't know who painted it. Didn't ask. Some things were meant to just be. When she turned to go, she noticed something else. At the corner, a man sat in his car, filming. She didn't look away this time. She stared back, unblinking, daring him to blink first. He did, then drove off. Back home, Keisha took the sign Samira had made, "My mommy is brave," and taped it to the front window, where everyone could see, because being brave didn't mean she wasn't afraid. It meant she kept going. And she wasn't finished yet. Not even close. Keisha woke up before dawn. The thin slivers of light barely touched the cracked window pane of their small apartment. She could hear distant sirens wailing in the cold morning air. Her heart started to race, and an uneasy knot formed in her stomach. It felt like the world was closing in, tightening its grip with every passing moment. Samira was still curled up next to her, her soft breathing steady and peaceful, a fragile contrast to the storm brewing outside. Keisha brushed a stray lock of hair from her daughter's forehead, trying to calm herself. This is not how it's supposed to be, she thought, not for her, not for us. Glancing through the window, the red and blue lights from the police cars painted the street outside with an eerie glow. Voices echoed from the neighbors' houses, and a crowd was already gathering. She recognized a few faces, people who had stood with her at the protest, neighbors who had offered food, friends who had sent messages of support. Yet despite all that, the fear still lingered, sharp and unrelenting. The phone rang abruptly, shattering the quiet. Keisha reached for it, recognizing Jacobs's calm voice on the other end. "They're searching the block again," he said quietly, his tone heavy with concern. "Apparently, someone threatened the community center last night. The police are taking no chances." Keisha closed her eyes, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just her story anymore. It had become a symbol of a much bigger fight, one tangled in pain, rage, and hope. Later that morning, a call came from a local reporter. She introduced herself hesitantly but firmly. "Ms. Davis, we want to share your story. The real story, your truth." Keisha hesitated. Opening herself up felt like ripping old scars. But silence had never been a shield. It was a cage. After a long moment, she found her voice. "If my story can help someone else, if it can make people listen, then yes, I'll do it." The day of the interview was sweltering, the small studio packed with bright lights and cameras. The room felt suffocating. Every question felt like a probe, digging deep into wounds that hadn't yet healed. "Do you ever feel scared? Afraid to step outside, to live freely?" "Yes," Keisha answered steadily. "I'm scared, but I refuse to let that fear control me or my daughter." "How do you protect Samira from all of this?" Keisha's voice cracked slightly. "With all my strength. Every day, I fight for her." Between takes, she closed her eyes, remembering the night she'd been stopped. The cold metal barrel of the gun pressed against her temple, the mocking sneer of the officer. The fear, the anger, the helplessness. But also the courage she never knew she had until that moment. The interview aired the next day, and the response was immediate. Social media blew up. Some messages were hateful and venomous. "Go back where you came from. You're just trying to start trouble." Others were filled with support and solidarity. "Stay strong. We stand with you. Your voice matters." And then came the threats. Keisha read each message with a growing sense of dread, her hands trembling as she tried to shield Samira from the ugliness. One evening, after putting her daughter to bed, Keisha found an unmarked package slipped through their mailbox. Inside was a small, folded note written in shaky handwriting. "Leave now or lose everything." Her breath caught in her throat. Jacobs urged her to call the police, but she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "If we run now, they win. We have to show we're not afraid." That night, Samira woke screaming from a nightmare filled with flashing lights and shouting voices. Keisha held her close, whispering soothing words, trying to drown out the terror with her own steady heartbeat. "I'm here, baby. Always." Despite the threats, the community's support swelled. Neighbors brought hot meals, blankets, and rides to appointments. Strangers sent letters filled with encouragement and hope. The local church opened its doors for meetings and vigils. For the first time in a long while, Keisha felt a flicker of warmth, the simple truth that she wasn't alone. Her fight had become their fight. The day of Officer Haskins's court hearing arrived quickly. Keisha sat quietly, clutching Jacobs's hand as their lawyer prepared the case. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, journalists, and activists. Haskins showed no sign of remorse. His lawyer tried to discredit Keisha's story, painting her as hostile and unreliable. But the evidence was clear: the videos, the witness statements, the overwhelming public support. Keisha's voice was steady when she testified, a mixture of pain and unwavering resolve. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly. "It's about justice. For my daughter. For all of us." The courtroom fell silent. One afternoon, as Keisha walked Samira to the park, a man approached. He wore a plain suit but carried the unmistakable air of authority. "Ms. Davis?" he asked gently. "Yes," Keisha replied cautiously. "I'm Detective Lewis. I wanted to speak with you." Keisha's heart tightened. She had learned to be wary of official promises. "I'm here to apologize," he said quietly. "On behalf of the department." Keisha looked at him carefully. "Words don't undo the pain." "True," Lewis said. "But I want you to know change is coming. We're trying." Maybe it was just talk. Maybe it was the start of something real. Keisha nodded, a mixture of skepticism and hope swirling inside her. That night, sitting on the porch while Samira slept inside, Keisha felt Jacob settle beside her, offering a warm cup of tea. "Do you really think it'll get better?" he asked softly. Keisha stared at the stars, searching for answers. "Maybe not soon," she admitted. "But it has to." They sat together in the quiet, drawing strength from one another's presence. Days passed in a blur of tension and fleeting moments of light. One morning, Samira came home from preschool clutching a drawing. It was a simple picture. Her family holding hands, with a police officer smiling beside them. "Look, Mommy," she beamed. "This is us. And that's the police. But they're friends now." Keisha smiled, tears threatening to spill. Maybe, just maybe, her daughter's innocent hope could change the world. The final scene in this chapter finds Keisha standing before a crowd in the same park where she had been stopped weeks ago. Samira's small hand fits tightly in hers. Her voice rings out strong and clear, cutting through the cold air. "We are here. We are loud. We are not afraid." The crowd erupts in cheers. For the first time in a long time, Keisha feels the power of her own voice, a voice that refuses to be silenced. The morning air was thick with tension and anticipation. Keisha stood behind the makeshift podium, her hand gripping the microphone tightly, the voice trembling just slightly. The park was filled with people. Neighbors, friends, strangers who had heard her story and come to stand beside her. Banners waved gently in the breeze. Cameras and phones captured every moment. Samira clung to her mother's leg, her wide eyes shining with curiosity and quiet strength. Keisha inhaled deeply, remembering everything: the fear, the pain, the moments when she thought she might break. She looked out at the crowd. "We've been told to be quiet, to be small, to stay in the shadows." She began, her voice steady now. "But no more." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This isn't just my fight. It's ours. For every mother who worries for her child. For every child who dreams of a world where they are safe. For every person who has been told they don't belong." She paused, eyes briefly locking with the faces before her. Black, white, brown, young, old, all united. "We are not afraid." The crowd erupted, cheers rising like a wave. Samira tugged at Keisha's skirt, her small voice clear. "Mommy, they like you." Keisha smiled, pulling her daughter close. "Yes, baby, they do." Later, as the crowd dispersed, Jacobs wrapped his arm around Keisha's shoulders. The weight of exhaustion pressed on her, but beneath it was a growing light, the kind that comes from standing up, being heard. The days that followed were not easy. The fight for justice stretched on with no guarantees. But with every step, Keisha found new strength. The local police department began to implement sensitivity training. Community groups organized safety workshops. The neighborhood, once shadowed by fear, began to glimpse hope. One afternoon, as Keisha and Samira walked hand in hand along the cracked sidewalks, a familiar figure approached, Detective Lewis. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for your courage, for pushing us to do better." Keisha nodded slowly, wary but hopeful. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Lewis admitted. "But your voice started something." At home, Keisha tucked Samira into bed, watching her daughter's peaceful face. The nightmare had not disappeared, and perhaps never would, but the dawn was breaking. She whispered softly, "We're going to be okay, I promise." Outside, the city lights flickered as a new day began. The fight was far from over, but Keisha and Samira faced it together, unbroken.